That day, I had been working from home, spending most of my time in the study. Since morning, the cheerful chatter of my husband, Thomas, and his daughter, Hannah, echoed through the house. It was the first time I'd heard them talk with such excitement. Curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly crept toward the hallway to listen. Then I heard something that stopped me cold. "It's so much more peaceful without that annoying wife around," Thomas said, his voice lighthearted. Annoying wife? Was he talking about me? My heart sank, and my mind scrambled to make sense of it, replaying his words over and over. Did he really see me like that? Before I could recover from the shock, Hannah chimed in. "We still need her for my college fees, though. We can't do without that human ATM." Human ATM? Those words stung deeper than I could have imagined. Was that all I was to them? A source of money? I had given so much to support Hannah, believing it was my role as a stepmother, hoping my care would eventually earn her trust and affection. But now, it was clear they didn't value me. They only valued what I provided. Fighting back tears, I quietly returned to my room. My hands trembled as I began packing a suitcase, taking only the essentials. When they left the house for dinner, I slipped out the door without a word. As I drove away, I felt a mix of heartbreak and resolve. Just because I was lonely didn't mean I deserved this. If all they wanted was my money, I had no reason to stay. My name is Catherine, and I'm a mid-level accountant. For 15 years, I've worked diligently in my field, building a steady, stable career. After my first marriage ended, I threw myself into my work, using it as both a distraction and a lifeline. Even during the toughest times, I stayed focused, knowing my career was my anchor. My first husband, Zach, had struggled with alcohol dependency. At first, it seemed like he just drank a little too much on occasion, but over time, it became a daily crutch. He carried unresolved pain from his past, pain I couldn't heal for him, no matter how hard I tried. Counseling or a structured recovery program could have helped, but Zach wasn't ready to face his demons. When our marriage ended, I wasn't lost. I leaned on the skills I had honed through years of hard work. Eventually, I transitioned to a better-paying position and found financial stability. Still, I sometimes wondered if I was meant to live without a family of my own, focusing solely on my career. Then, I met Thomas. Thomas worked as a pharmaceutical salesperson, often visiting my office as part of his job. He wasn't particularly assertive, but there was a gentleness about him that drew me in. My nurturing instinct kicked in, and I wanted to support him. He shared his struggles as a single father raising Hannah after his ex-wife's infidelity. His vulnerability touched me, and I believed we could build a life together. But as time went on, cracks began to show. Thomas often spoke about wanting to find a better-paying job, but seemed stuck in a cycle of switching roles without real reflection. When I asked about his strengths, his answers were vague and uninspiring. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I just feel like I keep failing." I tried to encourage him, explaining that failure was a stepping stone to growth. But his reluctance to take risks or learn from his mistakes worried me. He seemed more content dreaming about success than working for it. Still, I reassured him that my income could provide stability for us while he figured things out. Instead of feeling supported, he seemed to interpret my words as a safety net. "Thanks, Catherine," he said. "Honestly, being an employee doesn't suit me, so this is a relief. I'm not planning to quit now, but it's nice to know I don't have to worry about increasing my income." His response left me uneasy, as if he was shifting the entire financial burden onto me. But I pushed those feelings aside, telling myself he would eventually find his footing. When Thomas and I got married, I met his daughter, Hannah, for the first time. She looked me up and down with a critical gaze before bluntly asking, "So, what exactly do you bring to the table? Good job, decent salaries?" Her words took me aback for a moment. I was stunned into silence, realizing she was essentially questioning my worth. I felt a wave of embarrassment. I didn't consider myself particularly glamorous or charming, but her bluntness caught me off guard. "Hannah, that's rude," Thomas interjected. "I didn't mean anything by it," she replied casually, shrugging. I held back a retort, not wanting to create conflict during our first meeting. Instead, I tried to keep the conversation light. So, what kind of work do you do, Catherine? She asked with unexpected curiosity. Surprised, I decided to share a little about my job. Maybe I thought my experience might inspire her or spark ideas for her own future. Well, I work in accounting. Do you know what accountants do? Yeah, like handling expense reports or reimbursements, she said nonchalantly. That's part of it, I replied. But there's a lot more involved. I explained my role in simple terms, handling monthly closings, preparing consolidated reports, and crafting financial strategies. I talked about managing transactions, creating budgets, and overseeing financial planning. I tried to convey that my job required both analytical and management skills. What kind of qualifications do you need for that job? She asked. Well, you need accounting certifications, and if you want to advance, experience in finance or banking can be really helpful in this field. Experience often matters as much as education, I added, hoping to convey the expertise my work required. But Hannah looked completely uninterested. Thomas chimed in, his tone casual. That sounds pretty busy. So, how much do you make doing all that? For a moment, I almost answered truthfully. My salary was just shy of 6 figures, a milestone I was working toward. But when I noticed Hannah smirking and glancing at Thomas, as if they were sharing some inside joke, I decided to give a vague response. Let's just say it's a bit above average for an accountant, I said with a polite smile. Hannah rolled her eyes and made a dismissive noise. She glanced at Thomas, and the two of them exchanged a look that made me feel like an outsider. Trying to lighten the atmosphere, I continued explaining more about my work, but my words seemed to fall flat. I reminded myself that this was just the beginning. Building a family takes time. I thought I was determined to support both Thomas and Hannah and be part of their lives. If it came down to it, I was even willing to support Hannah's education financially. However, what I didn't realize at the time was Thomas's true intentions. Over time, it became clear that he had been planning to rely on my income from the very start. He even mentioned wanting to enroll Hannah in an expensive private university, one that was known to accept students as long as the tuition was paid up front. Once we started living together, I began noticing troubling patterns. For instance, Hannah often skipped her tutoring sessions without telling me. One day, the tutoring center even called to inform me that she hadn't shown up. Hey, Hannah, I knocked on her door. What happened with tutoring today? She answered with a bored tone. I attended remotely. Her excuse didn't sit right with me. The center had recently switched back to in-person sessions and wouldn't have called if she'd attended virtually. I started to worry about her commitment to her education. Did she really have the motivation for college, or was this just another way to take advantage of my support? Hannah, if you're struggling with any subjects, I can help you review if you'd like, I offered. Why would I need help? Hannah shot back, her tone sharp. I just thought maybe I could help, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You might feel more comfortable asking me questions. She let out a heavy sigh, clearly irritated. Look, I don't need any of that. It's kind of weird that you're trying to act all motherly. Her words stung more than I expected. My offer wasn't meant to insult her, but it was clear she had taken it the wrong way. I instantly regretted saying anything. Perhaps she was already feeling frustrated about her studies, and my well-meaning comment had only added to her stress. I'm sorry, I said quickly. You're right. You should go at your own pace. I didn't mean to overstep, but deep down, I knew the issue was serious. Missing tutoring sessions, especially in a fast-paced college prep program, would only make things harder for her in the long run. Without a strong commitment, Hannah could easily fall behind. Later that evening, I decided to bring it up with Thomas. Thomas, can we talk about Hannah's studies for a minute? Sure, what's going on? He asked. Please don't scold her, I began, trying to tread carefully, but her tutoring center has called a few times. It seems she hasn't been attending regularly. Oh, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, he said with a sigh, brushing it off as if it were no big deal. She's always hated studying. He smiled as he added, she's got her eye on a private university, one of those schools that will take her as long as we can pay the tuition. His nonchalant attitude unsettled me. Perhaps Hannah lacked motivation because she believed everything would be taken care of for her. But as her stepmother, I didn't feel it was my place to point this out. Instead, I nodded and let the conversation drop. I returned to my room, preparing for an online meeting. My new schedule allowed me to work from home twice a week, giving me more opportunities to observe Thomas and Hannah's behaviors. Little by little, my earlier worries about their intentions began to resurface. I couldn't shake the feeling that they might be expecting me to foot the bill for Hannah's entire college tuition. While I had no problem supporting her dreams, I didn't want to be taken advantage of. As the days passed, I began noticing more troubling patterns. Thomas, for example, would often sleep in on weekdays or return home early in the afternoon. One morning, I walked into the living room and was surprised to see him there. "Oh, hey," I said. "You're here?" "Yes, it's my work-from-home day. Are you off today?" "Actually, I took the morning off," he replied casually. I was really tired from a late night of work yesterday, but as I stood there, I caught a faint whiff of alcohol in the air. It seemed more likely he had been out drinking than working late. I let it slide, but over time, I realized these mornings were becoming a pattern. Thomas often talked about how he never seemed to fit in at work. I had always assumed he was just unlucky, but now I started to wonder if his own habits were to blame. One morning, I accidentally overslept by about 30 minutes because I hadn't been feeling well. My first meeting wasn't until 10 a.m., so I planned to take it slow and ease into the day. As I lay in bed, half asleep, I heard voices coming from downstairs. I glanced at the clock. It was already 9 a.m. Why were there voices at this hour? Thomas should have left for work, and Hannah should have been at school. Curious, I tiptoed down the stairs. "Dad, are you taking the day off again?" I heard Hannah ask. "Of course," Thomas replied, his voice relaxed. "I'm already using up my vacation days. Might as well use them before I quit." "Wait, are you really quitting?" Hannah's voice was filled with surprise. "I'll be technically between jobs," Thomas replied casually. "Not a slacker. Just, taking some time to think." I froze in place. Was he seriously planning to quit his job without telling me? "Well, I'm just a student," Hannah said, her tone casual. "So, I don't have to worry about jobs yet." They kept talking as if responsibility was an abstract concept, something they didn't have to face. And then I heard the words that shattered any illusions I had left. "Life's so much more peaceful without the annoying wife around," Thomas said, chuckling. Annoying wife. Was he really talking about me? My stomach twisted as the realization hit. My breath caught in my throat. To him, I wasn't a partner. I was an inconvenience. And then Hannah's voice chimed in, adding insult to injury. "But we can't have her gone completely. I mean, I still need her around for college expenses, right?" I froze. Did they truly think of me as nothing more than an ATM? A high school student saying that about me was beyond disrespectful. My head spun as I pieced together the truth. From the beginning, I'd been nothing more than financial support to them. Quietly, I stepped back upstairs, my heart racing. I didn't make a sound as I packed my largest suitcase with essentials. When I heard them leave for lunch, I seized the opportunity to escape. Enough was enough. Staying would only drain me emotionally and financially. I had given them countless chances, believing they would change, but they had taken my kindness for weakness. As I walked out of the house, I felt both a weight lifting and a pang of sadness. On my desk, I left the divorce papers. They would know I was serious. I rented a small but cozy apartment near my workplace. It wasn't luxurious, but it gave me the peace and privacy I desperately needed. Almost immediately, the calls began. Thomas left multiple messages, all of which I ignored. I knew he wasn't calling out of affection. He was desperate. A month passed without real contact, though his attempts only grew more frequent. Then, late one night, my phone started buzzing persistently. This time, it was Hannah. I could imagine the panic setting in now that their ATM was gone, but deep down, I felt no sympathy. Finally, around midnight, Thomas called again. Sighing, I picked up. I was ready to put an end to this once and for all. "It's late, Thomas. This is highly inappropriate," I said flatly. "Catherine, finally. Where are you?" His voice sounded panicked, but I knew better than to fall for it. That's not important. Just file the divorce papers, I said firmly. Divorce? Why? He asked. His faint confusion only fueled my frustration. You know exactly why, Thomas. You said enough. I'm done being disrespected. Look, we need to talk. Amelia is planning on attending open house events, and she really wants you there. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Oh, you mean for that expensive private college? The one where tuition costs a fortune. He hesitated. Well, yes, but it's important for her future. She needs to be prepared. Ethan, I interrupted, my voice firm. It's time you face reality. Supporting Amelia is your responsibility, not mine. His silence spoke volumes. This time, I wouldn't give in to emotional blackmail. Maybe it's time you found a stable job and stepped up, I said bluntly. Can't we just talk this out, he pleaded. I'm willing to try again. Really?
No, Ethan.
The way you and Amelia treated me, there's no going back from that. He fell silent again, seemingly out of arguments. I guess I never thought it would come to this, he finally muttered. That's because you took me for granted. Both of you did, I said, before hanging up. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had said everything I needed to say. Over time, I stopped checking for their messages. There was no need to revisit the past. I focused on myself, enjoying the freedom and peace that came with moving on. Amelia eventually dropped out of her university plans and took a part-time job. From what I heard, she was struggling with the reality of independence, but at least she was learning. Ethan, on the other hand, drifted between jobs, occasionally reaching out for one last favor. I never responded. I had given them enough chances. It was time to live for myself. I even adopted a rescue cat, finding joy in the small, comforting moments of companionship. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt my life, one step at a time. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free.
I, 28 male, am still trying to understand the events of the last month. My ex-girlfriend, Julie, 29, thinks that my current girlfriend, Mindy, 28, is manipulative and sabotaged our 4-year relationship. I was in a loving relationship with Julie for the last 4 years. We met through some mutual friends. Julie and I were very compatible in terms of our love for outdoor activities and running. We have very similar lifestyles and supported each other well for the last 4 years. We've also been living together for the last 3 years. We even discussed getting married during the summer. Everything was great, and I planned to propose to her over the holidays. However, I started to see changes in Julie's behavior around September. She was acting distant and looking stressed. It was quite noticeable, and I was worried. I trust her wholeheartedly, and I could not imagine she would be cheating on me. However, she did spend more time by herself. Around the same time, Julie's friend Mindy messaged me privately and asked me if I could meet her secretly, as she wanted to tell me something about Julie. Mindy and Julie work together, and I've known Mindy ever since I started dating Julie. I was surprised, to be honest. I assumed the worst. I met her at a cafe after work. She asked me if things were going okay between Julie and me. She told me that Julie had said to her that she was planning to leave me soon. This was a total shock to me. I asked her if there was anyone else that Julie was interested in, and she said no. Julie confided in her that she wasn't sure about marrying me. She told me that she had to tell me this, as she didn't want me to be blindsided. I was devastated. I started putting more effort into making our relationship more exciting, planning more dates, etc. Mindy was also helping me through this time and telling me more about what Julie told her. Eventually, before Thanksgiving, Julie said to me that she loved me, but she wanted to take a break for a month to live alone. She said that she just wanted to live alone for a month to make sure she wanted to marry me. I was completely heartbroken. I asked her if she wanted to pursue someone else. She told me that that was not the case, and I better not do anything stupid either. She loves me with all her heart, but she just wants to stay away from me to ensure she's marrying me for love, not because she's used to being with me. I did not understand that at all. I told her that if she's not sure after 4 years if she wants to marry me, then maybe we should just break up. We had a big fight and broke up after a few days. As our lease was ending, we decided to part ways in December. She got a new apartment and I kept our old apartment and just took her name off the lease. After the breakup, I felt very lonely, as I wasn't used to being in the apartment alone. I didn't want to keep being sad and invited many friends for a New Year's party. I also invited Mindy. We had a good time, and my friends did their best to cheer me up. Mindy also mingled with my friends, and it was good. Mindy decided to stay back to help me clean up, and we hooked up that night. I felt guilty, but Mindy did cheer me up. Since then, we've hung out almost daily at my place. I'm still sad about Julie, but I won't lie. Being with Mindy makes me happy. She's sweet and caring. Last Sunday, we woke up, and someone was banging on the door. I went to open it, and it was Julie. She looked furious and started yelling at me. She kept on accusing me of cheating on her. I told her I most certainly did not cheat on her, and she was the one who broke up with me. Mindy was also at my apartment. Julie was just angry at both of us. She started calling Mindy a manipulative witch and told me that Mindy was the one who suggested to her that she should take some time away from me to understand her true feelings. I calmed her down and asked her to explain herself. She told me that since our marriage conversation, she told Mindy about it, and Mindy kept on asking Julie if she was sure about marrying me. Mindy suggested that she take some time to understand her true feelings and that I'll understand and give her some space. When I said no, Mindy convinced her that I was so controlling that I couldn't even give her 1 month to herself and convinced her to break up with me. Mindy told me she did not say such things. These were all Julie's ideas, and she was just there during these conversations. She did tell Julie that she told me about some of the things so that I could get a chance to make things right with her over the last few months. That made Julie more angry, and she started accusing me of emotionally cheating on her. Julie told me that the last few weeks have made her realize that we were meant to be together, but she now cannot believe that I could move on from a 4-year relationship in a week. On one hand, I want to believe Julie, but she broke up with me for no fault of my own. Mindy was there for me when I was down, but now I also doubt her. She suddenly started talking to me out of the blue, as we had never really been close before, and she immediately became my support after the breakup, although Julie was her close friend. Am I the idiot to emotionally cheat on Julie? Should I have told her about Mindy's text? Should I not have moved on from her so quickly, even though Julie broke up with me? I was just hurting, and Mindy was right there to support me. I need advice from someone with a clear mind on what's going on. Mindy played you both. It's kind of obvious from what you wrote. Man, talk to Julie. If you guys have been dating for 4 years, to the point where you were about to propose to her, you likely know her well enough to tell if she's probably lying or not. Hear her out and go with your gut. Even if you choose not to reconcile or believe her, I'd still take a break from dating Mindy. You rebounded hard. 1 week after a 4-year relationship ends, you're already sleeping with someone else? Take your time to mourn the relationship and center yourself. No need to rush into anything. I hope you were using protection. Otherwise, I expect Mindy will soon notify you of her pregnancy. Yep, the dude messed up. This level of obliviousness from OP is kinda shocking. I find it upsetting that he doesn't trust Julie's word over Mindy. He claims to have loved and trusted Julie, yet Mindy was supposedly Julie's friend, and crap-talked her and jumped in bed with him at the first opportunity. Friends don't do that. I bet Julie wouldn't treat a friend that way, and I bet when in several years Mindy goes full-out Gone Girl on him, he'll be all surprised Pikachu face. But there were no red flags at all. Mindy knew exactly what she was doing when she volunteered to stay behind after the New Year's Eve party to help OP clean. Mindy played Julie. OP played himself. Mindy is the catalytic idiot. OP is definitely the one who kept the fire burning idiot, while Julie fell for the manipulation of what was supposed to be her best friend and her entire relationship. Wow, poor girl. Imagine the destruction Mindy might cause with some other person who she doesn't want in OP's life. I once knew someone like that. Luckily, everyone started to see her true personality, and it was twisted. Good riddance to her. I feel like Julie dodged a bullet. Now she's not marrying a man who sneaks around with other women behind her back and sleeps with her friends. I've been dating Matt, 26, for a little over a year. We knew each other 2 years prior to dating, and we got along really well. I have a son, toddler, and a daughter, preschooler, who we met multiple times when I was with the friend group. Here's the thing, though. We just got a place together, but the place needed work before we could move in, so we agreed with the landlord that we would help fix it up with him, the landlord, to get half off the first month's rent. He agreed, so for a month, we were there every day cleaning this place up, and I started noticing some red flags like a quick temper, but I literally just assumed it was because the AC wasn't working, and it was like a sauna in the house. So he was pouring sweat and getting angry, but again, I thought it was because he was hot. But as soon as he cooled off, he was fine again. But we finished the house, the AC was working again, so it was no longer hot. We moved in yesterday morning. He was barking orders all day to me, telling me where to put things, or if I put something somewhere he didn't like, he was all, "Why would you put that there?" and literally looked at me like I was stupid with the "Are you serious?" look. But I let it slide because I really didn't know what else to do, I guess. Or every 15 minutes, he asked me to go with him to Walmart because he just wanted to blow a bunch of money on stuff to make the place feel like home. We hadn't even unpacked half of our stuff either. He got irritated when I said I didn't think we should spend more money right now. But anyway, I go and pick up my kids and stuff for dinner. I grab a family pack of kielbasa, the one that has 3.5 strips and rice. Well, I only cut up 2 of the kielbasa because that's literally plenty. He comes over and says, "Why aren't you making all of it?" So I told him I didn't need to make all of it and that this would feed us all and would still be enough for leftovers. Then I commented about how I would use the rest of the kielbasa that I wasn't cooking to feed my kids and myself the next day because I like kielbasa sandwiches. He blew up. Thankfully, the kids weren't inside to hear it. My mom came over and brought them to the park across the street. He told me there was no way it would feed all of us and that I was selfish for only thinking about what I would eat tomorrow instead of worrying about feeding us all tonight. He walked out and slammed the door after I said, "Are you really blowing up on me about food right now?" I watched him drive off. I immediately started taking my kids and my kids' stuff out to the car and had my mom leave with my kids. I get everything loaded up before he returns. Most of my stuff is still in storage. Well, he texted me about 25 minutes after I left, saying, "Did you really leave? Please come back and talk to me. I'm sorry. I'm having such a bad day, and I'm just exhausted from working and doing the repairs here. You shouldn't have left over this," etc., etc. So, am I the idiot for leaving the same day I moved in with my boyfriend? Edit. I generally don't have the energy to argue with salty, toxic masculinity men. I work full-time. I'm not leeching Matt's money. I bought the food with my money. Half of my money went into getting us in the house. I work full-time at a bank. He had work the next day, but I didn't. Therefore, he wouldn't have been home to eat the leftover kielbasa with me and my kids. And therefore, no, I didn't include him in it. Not the idiot. Leaving was the right decision. He thought he had you in a position where you wouldn't leave. Started being a total moron once you agreed to live together and started working on the apartment. It would have only gotten worse over time. You did what's best for you and your kids. It was the audacity to say, "You shouldn't leave over this," when he literally left over it. Rules for three, not for me. That dude's a red flag, and you did the right thing. I'm so glad you moved you and your children out. Please don't go back to him, ever, no matter what he says. You got a dose of reality and made the very best decision for you and your kids. Well done, OP. Please tell me you took the kielbasa with you. After CPS got involved, my husband and I, both 33 and male, recently became guardians of my niece, Ella, teen. There's a lot of background here that I need to get out of the way first. Ella's father's my brother, Tom, and Ella's mom died due to complications delivering my other niece, Becca, pre-tween. Ella was 7 at the time, and she blamed Becca for their mom's death. She quickly became furious and expressed hatred for her sister and made comments about how Becca should have been the one to die instead and that Becca stole her mom from her. Tom did not get Ella any help. I got involved and warned him. Ella was not coping well and things would turn nasty. Tom said he was helping the girls' relationship and that's all that would be needed. Then 2 years later, with no therapy and no improvement in the relationship between the girls, Tom married Sarah. This is where things went from bad to worse. Becca adored Sarah and started calling her mom almost immediately. This only angered Ella more. She would get so angry at her dad, at her sister, at her stepmom, and she would tell Becca she deserved to die, and how dare she replace the woman who died because of her. She told Tom that he was sick for doing that to her mom. She told Sarah she was stealing from her mom, and she hated her and her ugly face, and that she would never be good enough. These things happened out in the open and were witnessed by our extended family, but they also went on at home. Sarah did her best to try and get Ella help, but Tom was not on board, and Sarah wasn't the right person to do it. CPS became involved after Ella called them on Sarah and wanted to get Becca and Sarah separated at all cost. She wanted to punish her sister for calling Sarah mom and wanted to punish Becca too. It became clear after CPS got involved that while Sarah was not a danger to Becca, Ella and Becca could not continue to live together in the environment they were in. They only took things so seriously because Ella told the social worker after wishing Becca and Sarah dead and telling them how much she hates her sister. My husband and I stepped up and offered to take Ella, which CPS agreed to. When I spoke to them about the rules and how everything would be handled, they said not to set up visits with Tom or Becca for Ella and to get Ella therapy. But they said we could attend larger family functions even if they would be there if we wanted to, but it likely would be better not to. I already knew this. My husband and I discussed it and agreed we should all stay away while Ella's with us and still struggling as much as she is. I told my family what we had decided, and they didn't understand why we couldn't have quick visits or try to expose the girls to each other in short bursts. I said it felt like it would be bad for both of them, but mostly for Ella, who I had to prioritize as she needed so much help. My family then claimed my big announcement was like a screw you to them. Tom was enraged. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Tom has failed to help her, so it's great she has you to step up. She's not ready to be around Becca and Sarah. She needs therapy, love, and time. And you're protecting Becca. She doesn't need to be around someone who hates her that much. Poor Becca's been abused her entire life by Ella. She's going to need help. It feels like no one in your family has taken seriously Ella's behavior in the past 8 years. 8 years of believing it's nothing, just a phase, a tiny adjustment, and more minimizing magical thinking. Honestly, I don't care that the rest of your family doesn't understand. Do what is best for Ella. This is what CPS expects of you, and this is what Ella finally deserves. The rest of your family's in denial about Ella's extreme dysfunction if they support Tom's position. My family has a tradition dating back 6 generations in which the firstborn son is named William. My father and I use our middle names to avoid confusion, while my grandfather is Bill. It's not that I don't like tradition, it's just that my middle name, James, is the name I've always been known as, and I always hated being made fun of when I was younger, especially at school, when a new teacher would inevitably call out my actual first name when taking the register, and all the other kids would laugh at me for trying to explain that I didn't want to be called that. Now I'm an adult. I know that if I wanted to, I could legally change my name by deed poll, but I guess I've just gotten used to the inconvenience, and at this stage of my life, it's more of a conversation starter if anything else. I also understand that of all the things to be made fun of when younger, it's pretty low down on the list, and some people would just say I'm being petty. Anyway, I've recently become a father to a beautiful baby boy, and to my family's horror, we've named him Ezra, which both my partner and I love. We've still given him the middle name William, but this is not good enough for my family, who've practically not acknowledged my son's name at all. He's a few months old now, and whenever they interact with him, he's referred to as Junior, or the child. All I want for Ezra is for him to feel like he's his own person when he grows up, not to feel like there's some kind of burden on him to live up to any expectations we might have for him, like I suppose I've always felt somewhat, and to feel comfortable knowing that any decision he makes, his mom and I will always support him. This is what makes me stand by our decision, but I can't help but feel guilt for breaking the tradition and that there's now a slight rift between me and my family, especially my dad. Am I the idiot for not naming my son William? Not the idiot. You and your partner can name your child whatever you like. You didn't start this tradition and had no say in it, so your family has no say in whether you like it going or not. I love that you kept the tradition by giving William as a middle name. That should be plenty enough, but don't feel like the idiot for naming your child. Not to mention that the mother should get a say too. What if she had her own family traditions? Why is it OP's family that supposedly gets a say? I'm not a fan of naming kids after other people in general, but seriously, One in every generation? Does it include cousins too? How confusing it must be to have so many Williams. He's referred to as Junior or the child. I suggest you do the same with them. Always refer to them as the senior or the mother, etc. See how long it takes them to catch on. Tradition's just peer pressure from dead people. It's not up to anyone else but you and your partner. Your family's refusing to call Ezra by his name is extremely disrespectful and immature. Obviously, not the idiot, but I will laugh if your son grows up and decides to go by William.
You don't have to give me anything in return. I'm happy to help without any gifts. But she insisted. After that, we occasionally ran into each other. One day, the boiler broke down and she asked if she could shower at my place because fixing it immediately wasn't an option. I suggested boiling water or going to a nearby sauna, but she said the sauna was closed that day, and she once got burned by spilling a boiling kettle as a child. So she was too scared to handle hot pots. "I'll cook something delicious for you after you shower," I said. And she went into the bathroom. She hummed a tune while washing up and emerged looking rejuvenated. It was the first time I saw her without makeup. Her skin was flawless and her figure, though petite, was remarkably toned. At that moment, I saw her in a new light, and we connected on a deeper level. She joked, "I've tried everything to catch a handsome young man's eye, and nothing worked. But today, my plan succeeded." When I asked about her husband, she said, "Don't worry, he's on a business trip for a few days." She asked if I wanted tortillas, and when I mentioned I also liked broccoli soup, she brought ingredients from her house to cook at mine. She was quick and skilled in the kitchen, and we enjoyed the meal together. We spent every day together until the day before her husband was due back. She offered to iron my shirts, saying, "You don't have much to take care of living alone. Let me do it." But I insisted, "I'm better at ironing. You should just relax and enjoy your visit." Living in an area surrounded by shops and markets, she suggested visiting a massage chair salon run by a friend of hers. We agreed to go in the evening to avoid the morning crowd of elderly visitors. Upon arriving, her friend, seeing me, exclaimed, "Wow, so young and handsome. Emily must have praised you to the skies." I was taken aback and looked at Emily. "Sophia, stop it and let us try the massage chairs," she said. We chose the full course, and Sophia explained that these bed-style massage machines were more popular than traditional massage chairs. She had to squeeze the leg compression massagers onto my legs, joking that whoever ended up with me was lucky, which was embarrassingly flattering. After enduring the playful teasing from the ladies at the salon, I felt refreshed and relaxed from the massage, despite not having exercised separately from work. The next day, I visited the salon again after work without telling Emily, and Sophia seemed quite surprised. I had such a good night's sleep after using the massage chair. "I just had to come back for more," I said. The lady, Sophia, was about to close up shop for the evening, but seeing a handsome young man walk in, she decided she needed to call her husband and tell him she'd be home late. Feeling a bit guilty, I offered to come back another time, but she insisted it was fine and called her husband anyway. I have 2 customers who came in for a trial session, explaining everything and going through. The process will take at least an hour and a half. Don't wait up for me, Just eat dinner on your own, she told him over the phone. The thought that she might be hungry because of me made me feel somewhat bad. When you do this kind of work, you adjust to the customers' schedules. It's fine if I eat later, so please, enjoy your session, Sophia reassured me. She turned on the heat function of the massage chair, and I ended up falling asleep during the session, entering a dreamlike state. In this state, I felt Sophia looking at me with a smile, which was somewhat unsettling considering my hands and legs were restrained by the massage equipment, and I wasn't covered by a blanket. After the session, she mentioned locking up the store and suggested moving to a sofa massage chair to chat for a bit. I agreed. Once the full session was over, she led me to the sofa massage chair and draped a blanket over me. Sophia's earnest gaze somehow made me feel like I was burning through my youth. A few days later, I ran into Emily, the neighbor lady. I heard you visited Sophia's place. Why didn't you tell me? You went alone. Yeah, the massage chairs are pretty good. My place is too small to have one, so I plan to go there occasionally, I replied. Sophia was so happy to have a handsome guest visit her shop. Let's go together next time, haha, she suggested. I couldn't tell how much Sophia and Emily had shared with each other. Shouldn't secrets be kept among close friends? My mind was so cluttered after meeting Emily that I couldn't even focus on work. I came up with a plan to keep the ladies from spilling too many secrets. I suggested to Emily, let's all have dinner and hang out with Sophia. We set a date, and it felt like a bond was forming. We decided to treat each other like sisters. We had steak for dinner and enjoyed a few drinks, which left us feeling quite merry. Should we all stay together tonight? I suggested. The ladies loved that idea. It was an entirely new experience for me, but it turned out to be quite extraordinary. We all felt like we had ascended to heaven that night, and the ladies were thoroughly satisfied with the special time we spent together. Occasionally, I meet up with Sophia and Emily separately. Each has her own unique charm, which I really appreciate.
A lone father with just a middle school education, I wouldn't wish for my daughter to wed into such a situation. Leave my son. Jake proposed to his girlfriend, Ruby. I accompanied him to greet her parents, only to discover her father was the well-known owner of a brand store. Knowing his fiancée came from a distinguished family made Jake nervous, but he confidently answered all of Thomas's probing questions. However, the moment Thomas learned I only graduated from middle school, he struck Jake across the face. I can't contain my anger at someone who looks down on others because they don't match his family's status. Let's meet again, I said, and Jake, Ruby, and I headed to the hospital on the way. I told her that I might confront Thomas about this. After hearing her response, I was more determined than ever. The next day, Thomas was shocked to learn who I really am. I'm Alex, and I'm 69 years old. Since my wife passed away, I've been living with my son Jake since retiring. My legs have gotten weaker, and now I can't walk for long periods, so I rely on a wheelchair at home. I can't move around without Jake's help. He's 20 now, in the prime of his life, so as to not be a burden to him, we hired a housekeeper. But Jake still cares deeply for me, pushing my wheelchair out even on his days off. I'm always silently grateful to him. And then, Jake's big moment came. He proposed to his girlfriend, Ruby, one night after coming home from work. Jake's news almost made me drop my tea. Dad, I proposed to my girlfriend, he said. Is that so? What did Ruby say? I waited anxiously for Jake's reply. Slowly, Jake formed a circle with both hands. She said okay. She'll marry me. I'll never forget the look of happiness on his face at that moment. I held back tears of joy and congratulated Jake. Congratulations, you've grown into a fine man, I said. But Jake's excitement was short-lived. and he suddenly looked downcast. What's wrong? You got a yes, but you look so down all of a sudden. It's great that she said yes, but now I have to get her parents' blessing, and I'm really nervous about it. I also felt really nervous when I went to greet my late wife's parents. Her father was quite stubborn, and it took many bows before he finally gave his blessing. And now, Jake is about to go through the Jake rite of passage, as I did. Trying to encourage him, I patted him on the shoulder. I was really nervous when I went to ask for permission to marry. But if you express your feelings honestly, your sincerity will surely come across. I'm not just a doting father when I say that Jake is truly a fine young man. He's serious about his work and even does the housework. He's also popular with the ladies in the neighborhood. Because he's such a pleasant young man, okay, it's a bit scary, but I'll give it my best shot. That's the spirit. First, let's drink to your successful proposal. That night, the two of us toasted with our best sake. The marriage introduction was set to take place at a traditional restaurant. Ruby chose a restaurant that was accessible in my wheelchair, showing just how considerate she is. Jake definitely has good taste in women. She's a real catch. I'm sure these two will be happy together. Suddenly, I felt an urge to give Jake a gift to prepare him for the marriage proposal. I decided to buy something fitting for a man to boost his courage. So, while he was at work, I went with my hired assistant to a high-end department store. Looking around, I saw a set of bowls being sold as a couple's item. However, I quickly reminded myself that he hadn't yet received the parents' approval. Trying not to jump the gun, I headed to a men's boutique instead. Which one should I choose? I mumbled as I browsed. Being in a wheelchair, I couldn't reach the shelves and had to ask a nearby salesperson for help. Excuse me, could you help me see something on the top shelf? However, the salesperson ignored me upon seeing my wheelchair. Thinking he hadn't heard me, I tried again. Then, the salesperson said with a sneer, "We don't have anything suitable for someone like you here." I was taken aback by his attitude. Just as I was about to complain, a well-dressed man emerged from the back. The other staff bowed to him, showing he was someone important at the store. He seemed to be in his late 50s, stocky and stout. I approached him, hoping he would correct the salesperson's behavior. "Excuse me, I was treated horribly by your staff." As I was about to explain, the earlier salesperson called out, "Mr. Thomas, the president," and hurried over. This man in the suit was not the store manager but the president of the company. Upon hearing his name and taking a closer look, I recognized him. He was Thomas, the head of a major menswear brand that operates stores nationwide, a brand well known throughout Japan. "Well, sir, was there an issue with the staff?" When I explained what happened, Thomas looked down at me and asked again. That staff member treated me with disrespect when I asked for help. I expected Thomas to apologize and correct the issue, but to my dismay, he just snorted and laughed. "Haha, sir, this is a high-end men's store. If you're dissatisfied, perhaps try somewhere else." I was shocked and openly showed my anger. "Can't you see? Our clientele are all affluent. We have nothing suitable for someone as plainly dressed as you." Thomas smirked, laughing with the staff. Appalled by the treatment, I left the store in anger. Forget it. I don't need this place. I knew the brand was popular among celebrities, but this was a bitter experience. I eventually bought a different gift, but the incident left a bad taste in my mouth. I plan to give Jake the gift after a successful marriage proposal meeting, and today we are on our way to the traditional restaurant where Ruby's parents are waiting. "Sigh, I'm getting nervous," Jake sighed as he pushed my wheelchair. "Don't worry, Ruby's parents are probably nice people," I reassured him. Multiple Alexes as we approached our destination. Though traditional Japanese restaurants often have mats and cushions, they accommodated me with a room with chairs and a table waiting. There were Ruby and her parents, but the moment I saw her father's face, I involuntarily exclaimed, "What's wrong, Dad?" "Nothing, it's nothing." The father of the other party turned out to be Mr. Thomas, the president from earlier. Indeed, Ruby shares his last name, which isn't usual, so I hadn't thought much of it. When I saw Thomas, he looked at me and nodded with a smile. His demeanor was different from our encounter at the store, and I couldn't hide my surprise. "Nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to today," he said, inviting me to sit down. That's when I realized he had forgotten meeting me. To him, I was just another unsuitable customer, not even worth remembering. Realizing he had forgotten, I calmed myself down, remembering that today was about the marriage proposal. However, the thought of Thomas becoming Jake's father-in-law didn't bring me joy. Japanese cuisine was served, and as the meal began, I felt awkward while Thomas started a conversation. So, where did you meet my daughter, Ruby? I met her through a mutual acquaintance at work, and it was love at first sight for both of us. They dated after work, and their relationship deepened, I added. Ah, you have a good eye to take a liking to my daughter, Thomas chuckled. I learned about your family after dating for a while, and was surprised to find out that my father-in-law is a famous apparel company's president. Haha, right? S seemed to be getting along well with Thomas. I was relieved to see the parents and Jake in a friendly atmosphere. Ruby, initially nervous, relaxed as she saw the two men chatting. Then, Thomas began. Our family line dates back far beyond the show era, and I've always been told by my father not to let our legacy fade. It's the duty of the Thomas family head. Yes, the mood tensed up, and Jake audibly swallowed. So, I need to determine if you are suitable to be my daughter's husband. Let's see if you have what it takes. Thomas gave Jake a sly look. He was smiling, but his words clearly placed us beneath him. I had thought this at the store, but Thomas is an arrogant man. He seems to think that all the glory built up by his ancestors is his own doing. Sitting quietly, Ruby whispered a criticism to him. Dad, please choose your words carefully. In an instant, Thomas slapped her across the face. It was so sudden that Jake and I couldn't move. What kind of attitude is that towards your father? I will decide who your husband will be. Don't you dare speak out. Ruby looked downcast with a bruised cheek. I was shocked. It was too much. Mr. Thomas, sir, that was a bit too much. Jake rebuked him immediately. Thinking, the Jackie. But perhaps that was a mistake as Thomas glared at him. Oh, a greenhorn dares to speak against me? Thomas dared to speak against me. I came here today hoping for your approval to marry Ruby, Jake responded, looking straight at the daunting figure before him. He was determined to marry Ruby no matter the opponent. Inspired by his courage, I also faced Thomas. My son is diligent at work and highly regarded by his superiors. He's still in his 20s, but I believe he has a promising future. Desperate to join our ranks, are you? Thomas scoffed. Keeping my cool against his snide remark, I said, I only wish for my son and Ruby's happiness. Please grant them your blessing for their marriage. Then I bowed my head down to the table. Please let your daughter marry me. Jake followed suit, bowing deeply. However, Thomas clicked his tongue loudly. Didn't you hear? I decide if you are suitable to be my son-in-law. Dad, don't raise your voice, it's disturbing the other patrons, Ruby intervened. Be quiet. Your marriage is my decision to make. Despite Ruby's attempt to stop him, Thomas glared back at us. Why are only two of you here? It's only polite for both parents to come to a marriage meeting. You know that, Jake's mother. It seems Jake had already explained our family situation to her, but Thomas appeared to have completely forgotten. My wife passed away when Jake was in high school. Since then, it's just been the two of us, I explained. We've overcome the grief of losing family members and are here now. My role, having outlived my wife, is to ensure Jake's happiness. So, it's a father-son household. Such broken people shouldn't dare approach our family, Thomas sneered. Jake and I were stunned by his insult. Ruby and her mother looked at Thomas in disbelief. Please take back what you just said. I might overlook it if it was just about me, but I can't ignore an insult towards my father and late mother. Jake, sitting beside me, was visibly angry, his face turning red. An insult? I'm merely stating facts, Thomas scoffed, taunting him further. Then, ignoring our opinions, he bombarded us with questions. Any promotions in the pipeline? If the current project I'm negotiating succeeds, there might be a chance for a promotion to manager. And you think that's enough to marry into? Thomas laughed mockingly. Every Alex Jake answered, Thomas would laugh at him as if mocking him. The atmosphere felt as oppressive as a stress interview, weighing heavily on the room. Ruby and her mother, perhaps frightened by Thomas, remained silent and looked down the whole Alex. I only like highly educated elites, truly. Jake, you've graduated from a decent university, right? I was getting angry at the way he was sizing up Jake. Facing Thomas, who judged us as lesser and sneered, I wanted to put him in his place, but I knew any reactions could jeopardize Jake's marriage. I studied economics at a national university and have experience studying abroad, Jake responded firmly, unfazed by Thomas's oppressive questioning. Ruby seemed relieved by his demeanor. I felt proud of my son, but perhaps disliking Jake's attitude, Thomas frowned and turned to me with a question. And where did you go to university? I felt an unpleasant premonition, but could not lie. Due to financial reasons, I only graduated from middle school and never went to college. And my answer? Thomas twitched his eyebrow and fell silent amid the heavy silence. Jake spoke up, educational backgrounds don't matter between Ruby and me. We are serious about wanting to marry. Just as he continued, Thomas's fist struck Jake's face. He was sent flying, crashing through the sliding doors onto the outside corridor. A passing server screamed in shock. I moved my wheelchair to see Jake with his nose swollen and red. Ruby rushed over and pressed a handkerchief to his nose. At this point, my patience with Thomas had run out. What are you doing to my son? I yelled at him. Thomas looked down on us with cold disdain. A single father with only a middle school education. I wouldn't want my daughter marrying into that. Get out. It seemed he had struck Jake because of his disdain for our family background and educational level. Let's meet again, I said, filled with the urge to retaliate but prioritizing Jake's care. I knew we needed to get him to a hospital due to a possible fracture. After giving Thomas a stern look, I asked a server to call a taxi. While waiting, I asked Thomas one last question. Do you recognize my face by any chance, Mr. Thomas? What? I wouldn't know someone as poor-looking as you. Thomas glanced at me and scoffed dismissively. Is that so? That's too bad, I retorted. What are you trying to say? You're not the bottom of the barrel, he sneered. I didn't respond, and as the taxi arrived, the server helped us get in. Ruby also tearfully offered to accompany us, so the three of us went to the hospital. On the way, Ruby spoke up softly. My father has always been like this, always saying we are a noble family. It seems William grew into such an arrogant person due to the privileged environment he was raised in. Having too much wealth seems to corrupt people. Yet Ruby is such a kind-hearted woman, unlike what one would expect from someone like him. She's still showing concern for Jake. How happy Jake and she would be if they got married. But the huge obstacle they face is Thomas, I said to Ruby. We might have to confront your father, and it might affect you, your mother, and your home. She looked at me with wide eyes, then with a determined look, she replied, no matter what, I want to marry Jake. I will tell my mother myself. Knowing her feelings, I took out my cell phone and made a call. Hello, it's me. Sorry for the urgency, but gather everyone for an emergency. Soon after, we arrived at the hospital. Fortunately, Jake did not have any fractures, only needing some ointment. We got a medical report from the doctor, now ready to handle Thomas whenever necessary. The next day, I went to a rented conference room somewhere in downtown. Worried about me, Jake was with his assistant today due to work. When I entered the conference room, many people were already there, including some older gentlemen and a woman in her 40s wearing glasses. Thomas was also present. Seeing me, he looked utterly shocked. Why are you here? He exclaimed loudly. As soon as he raised his voice, the others in the room glared at him. Noticing the odd atmosphere, Thomas looked around nervously. What's going on with everyone? It's obvious, Mr. Thomas, one remarked. More importantly, why is a middle school grad in this sacred place? Initially shocked, Thomas now looked at me with disdain. I gathered everyone here urgently. I responded, What? You are not an outsider, Thomas shouted in anger, but inciting his emotions further, I smirked mischievously. Is it appropriate to speak to me like that, considering I'm the majority shareholder? Poor Thomas's face turned to disbelief, and I couldn't help but laugh. My goodness, not knowing your own company's shareholders. What a noble family, I taunted. What? It's true. I own more than half of the company's shares and attend shareholder meetings. Though being in a wheelchair, I might not seem very noticeable. I had called the shareholders yesterday to organize an emergency shareholder meeting. Thank you for attending despite the short notice, I said to the shareholders who returned the gesture with smiles. Then, looking back at Thomas, who stared at me wide-eyed, he flinched under my gaze. Thank you for yesterday. I wanted to express my gratitude by holding this emergency shareholder meeting here, I said. What gratitude? Thomas trembled nervously. As the principal shareholder, I've worked as an investor. Even now, from my wheelchair, I analyze market trends and mentor juniors on investment strategies. The profits from my investments have exceeded hundreds of millions of dollars, enabling me to provide financial aid to numerous companies. In return, as a shareholder, I can influence the company's management policies and participate in the appointment and dismissal of executives, I continued. I would like to discuss a proposal for the dismissal of President Thomas, I said. Fire me? That's ridiculous, Thomas exclaimed and tried to leave the room. However, other shareholders blocked the door. Last night, when I told the shareholders about the emergency general meeting, they agreed with me and proposed a vote of no confidence against Thomas. Considering he struck the son of the principal shareholder, appropriate sanctions are necessary, I stated, glaring at Thomas. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he began to sweat and panic, yet he chuckled smugly, then burst out laughing. Haha, you think you can intimidate me? I won't let my family's legacy crumble in my generation. Thomas looked around at the shareholders. If you fire me, this company is finished. Our brand stands out because of its 100-year history. I plan to merge it with another company I support, I retorted. What? I am also a major shareholder in another company and considered merging it with Thomas's. I was prepared to use any means necessary to oust this contemptible man from his presidency. It's called an absorption merger. Your company will be absorbed by another, I explained. What? I won't allow it, Thomas stated defiantly. An absorption merger would mean he could no longer be president. Sensing his position was threatened, he directed hostility towards me. I won't let someone who knows nothing about running this family business take it from me. I can't let the injustice done to my son go unaddressed. I counted as we glared at each other, the tension palpable. Then, Thomas pointed at me with a cunning smile. You say he was harmed, but do you have any proof? Proof. It's rude to accuse someone without proof. You won't be easily forgiven, even if you apologize on your knees, he declared loudly. Then, he addressed the other shareholders. Have any of you seen proof from Mr. Alex? They looked at each other and shook their heads. I had only verbally informed them of the situation. Nobody has any proof. Then Mr. Alex's claims must be false, Thomas concluded. The room began to murmur, and suspicious glances were cast my way. Confident he had turned the situation around, Thomas gloated. You almost deceived everyone with your lies. I should sue you for defamation and get hefty compensation. As he approached me, still silent, he taunted. Why don't you say something? Or perhaps you do have proof. Yes, I replied, revealing what I had prepared. I had my assistant prepare something special. I had a projector set up in front of the screen and connected it to my cell phone. I've obtained special cooperation for the agenda. I will now play a video, I announced to Thomas and the others. I then played the video stored on my phone. Displayed on the screen was a scene of the Thomas family and my family having a meal together. The footage was shot from an overhead perspective, clearly from a security camera. When Thomas realized he was on camera, he started to panic. What is this video? When did you get this? He tried to approach me, but the shareholders held him back. I had anticipated this and secured the evidence in advance. In fact, after sending Jake to the hospital yesterday, I went back to the restaurant. I explained the situation to the owner and the waitress and bought the security footage from them. Did you bribe the restaurant? What a low move, Thomas exclaimed. I'm not so naive as to stay silent after my son was attacked, I retorted. The video continued to play, showing the scene where Jake was answering Thomas's questions before Thomas struck him. The shareholders gasped in shock. In the video, Thomas was seen yelling at us, a single father with only a middle school education. I wouldn't want my daughter marrying into that. Get out. Then the footage showed us leaving for the hospital by taxi. However, the video didn't end there. While Ruby, Jake, and I were on our way to the hospital. Thomas and his group were still at the restaurant. Thomas's expression tensed up as he watched. "Stop this video now," he yelled at me. But I had no intention of complying. Ignoring him, I turned up the volume. In the video, Thomas was reproached by his wife and then slapped her, saying, "Since I'm your husband, you obey without question. I won't tolerate backtalk from you, the company staff, or those pompous shareholders. You're all just pawns to me." The video ended with his wife sobbing, and the screen went blank. Silence fell over the room. Nobody spoke. Thomas stood pale-faced in front of the screen. That was the evidence. Video of President Thomas hitting my son? Oh, and the last part was just a bonus. I said with a smirk, "Now you can't deny it happened," I continued. Thomas, trembling, turned to face the shareholders. "Ah," he squeaked, stepping back in a pathetic manner. The shareholders glared at him fiercely, ready to pounce. With the proof presented and his disdain for the shareholders revealed, Thomas found himself cornered by everyone present. "You insulted the people who fund you. You know what happens next, right?" I added, smirking. Thomas's face contorted as he began to unravel. One can only imagine what happens to a company once its shareholders turn their backs, I said, smirking. Even the vast wealth of the Thomas family would be severely hit if the shareholders collectively abandoned them. Moreover, if the incident with Jake and Thomas's harshness were exposed externally, it would damage the company's image. Client transactions might also be withdrawn. "Okay, I understand. I'll increase the dividends for everyone, so please forgive me," Thomas pleaded, putting his hands together in front of the shareholders. But they were furious, saying, "We can't forgive someone who's insulted us behind our backs. Please, I'm terribly sorry. Forgive me." Thomas kept apologizing. Surrounded by the majority of people, now forced into a humble posture, normally bold, he quickly cowered when his position weakened. Seeing this, I realized that's the real Thomas, raised in privilege and pampered from birth. He lost any sense of gratitude, using his ancestors' prestige to look down on others. Living luxuriously and complacent, Thomas struck Jake without knowing I was the principal shareholder. This is the result of his choice. Unable to gain forgiveness from the shareholders, he half cried, clinging to me. "Mr. Alex, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Do you regret hitting my son?" He nodded vigorously and knelt before me. "Absolutely. I will also pay damages to your son, so please continue to support us financially." "I refuse. My goal is to remove you from the presidency." Then I continued, "We met before the marriage meeting, remember? At that restaurant we visited?" He finally recalled our meeting at the restaurant, his face turning pale as he trembled. "A company that can't train its staff properly isn't worth supporting." I gave him a cold look. Out of desperation, Thomas blurted out an incredible offer. "Then I will give you my daughter Ruby. I have raised her strictly. She is a fine woman. Please do as you wish with her." Despite it being his own daughter, he treated her like an object, which enraged me. "Don't mess with me. Children are not offerings." Anger nearly caused me to fall from my wheelchair. "I apologize, but Ruby wishes to marry Jake, and her will is also my will." "Oh, so you won't oppose Miss Ruby's wishes?" "Of course not." As I smiled slightly, he returned a nervous smile, misunderstanding my forgiveness. He slumped down, relieved. "Let's hear it from the person." He slumped down, relieved. Then, I called out towards the door, "Come on in." As the door opened, Jake, Ruby, and Thomas's wife entered. Seeing the three, Thomas's mouth fell open in astonishment. "Why are you all here?" "We came together." I had asked the three of them to wait by the door until I gave them a signal. I called the three of them here to directly confront Thomas with their intentions. Jake, with gauze on his nose, glared at Thomas. Seeing Jake and me, Thomas quickly bowed his head to him. "Jake, I deeply apologize for raising my hand against you. I am very sorry." Jake didn't respond and turned to face Ruby. "My desire to marry Ruby remains unchanged, but first, please hear what she has to say." Ruby looked straight at her father and said, "I have lived obeying your orders, grateful for how you raised me, but now I choose to be with Jake." Ruby, she and her mother stood side by side, glaring at Thomas. My mother and I are leaving the house and will cut ties with you. In the taxi, I learned about her decision to separate from Thomas. That's why I brought them here to tell him directly. Why? How you're my wife, aren't you? He grabbed his wife's shoulder, shaking her. However, she presented him with signed divorce papers. I will not let a cruel husband dictate my daughter's life. Jake and Ruby then declared to Thomas, we will get married after cutting ties with you, and my mother and I are leaving home. Thank you for everything up to now. She bowed her head, signifying their estrangement. Rejected by his family, William's son, Ed, clung desperately. No, don't abandon me. I've been awful, raising my hand and speaking harshly. I regret it. Don't leave me. But they looked down on him expressionlessly. Seizing the moment of his isolation, I addressed the shareholders. Let's get back to the main issue. Those in favor of dismissing President Thomas, please applaud. A few scattered claps gradually grew louder. When everyone except Thomas clapped, his fate was sealed. This marks the end of your glorious life. Curse your own foolishness. Thomas collapsed to the floor, weeping loudly. With that, the emergency shareholder meeting was concluded. Subsequently, the company was absorbed through a merger, and Thomas was stripped of his executive position. Now ostracized by former business associates aware of his brutality, he found himself utterly alone. Moreover, a skilled lawyer hired by his wife exposed years of domestic harassment, resulting in a multi-million-dollar settlement. The once prestigious Thomas family ended with his generation. Thomas tried to start new businesses using the remnants of his fortune, but soon faced financial difficulties and went bankrupt repeatedly, increasing his debts until nothing was left. His mansion was seized for debt repayment, and all valuable possessions were confiscated. Without work, family, or a home, Thomas wandered until he became homeless. One wonders what his ancestors, who had built such wealth, would think seeing him now. Likely, standing at his bedside at night, whispering words of resentment. After the merger, Ruby and her mother lived modestly, their faces brightening, freed from Thomas's oppressive presence. Relieved, Jake happily married Ruby. They built a new home and invited me to live with them. Initially, I refused, not wanting to intrude on the newlyweds, but they insisted, and I was spared loneliness. And one thing I almost forgot. I finally gave Jake the wedding gift I had carefully been saving for him.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
It's quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps in after years of noise, chaos, and laughter have left their imprint on the walls. Kathy's out shopping. She says it's just for groceries, but knowing her, she'll come back with something for the house, or maybe even something small for me. She's always thoughtful like that. We've been married for 24 years, and in just a month, we'll hit the big 25. A quarter of a century. That thought hits me harder than I expected. It feels like just yesterday I was fumbling with a ring in my pocket, trying to figure out how to propose without making a complete fool of myself. And here we are now, 2 kids grown and gone. The house suddenly feeling so much bigger than it used to. Both kids, Jack and Emily, are off at college. Jack's finishing up his senior year. Emily just started her sophomore. It's strange not having them around. The house used to hum with activity. Jack blasting music from his room, Emily arguing with Kathy about curfews, the constant buzz of their friends coming and going. Now, it's just me and Kathy most days, and when she's out like this, it's just me. I decided it was time to get out of bed. Kathy would probably laugh if she saw me now, lounging around like some retiree when it's barely mid-morning. I reached for the bottle of vitamins on my nightstand, popped the cap, and tipped one out into my hand. Except it didn't land in my palm. The small, round pill bounced off the edge of the table, hit the floor, and of course, rolled straight under the bed. Sighing, I muttered a few choice words under my breath and got down on my knees to retrieve it. It was darker under there than I expected, with a faint smell of dust I hadn't noticed before. I felt around blindly, brushing my fingers against stray bits of lint and an old sock that must have been Jack's before he left for college. Then my fingers closed around something else, thin, crinkly, and very out of place. I pulled it out and stared at it for a moment, my stomach sinking as I realized what it was. A condom wrapper. For a moment, my mind blanked. I just sat there on the floor, holding the thing in my hand like it was some alien artifact. My first thought was confusion. Who the hell? No one's been here. No guests, No parties. Nothing. It's just been me and Kathy in this house for the last 3 months. And then another thought hit me, one that made my chest tighten. I had a vasectomy after Emily was born. We decided 2 kids were enough, and I went through with it, no questions asked. So why would there be a condom wrapper under our bed? That's when it crept in, the thought I didn't want to entertain but couldn't push away. Kathy is cheating on me. Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and sharp, but I clamped it down. What was I going to do? Storm up to Kathy the moment she got home, waving a condom wrapper like it was a smoking gun? That wouldn't get me anywhere. She'd deny it, or worse, turn it around on me. No, I needed more than this flimsy piece of plastic to confront her. I got up, threw on a pair of jeans and a shirt, and grabbed my keys. The house felt suffocating now, every corner suddenly suspect. I needed to clear my head, and I knew exactly who to talk to. Davy Jones. No, not the pirate from the movies. The real Davy Jones, my old friend and a damn good private investigator. He got the nickname back when he was in the Navy, and it stuck, even after he swapped the sea for the streets. If anyone could help me figure out the truth, it was him. When I walked into his office, Davy was leaning back in his chair, feet up on his desk, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He looked up, grinned, and stood to greet me with a firm handshake. "Well, if it isn't Ben Miller," he said, motioning for me to sit. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I hesitated for a moment, the words sticking in my throat, but then I told him everything. The condom wrapper, my suspicions, the gnawing feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. Davy listened, his face serious, nodding every now and then but never interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking the graying stubble on his chin. "All right, Ben. I'll help you. Give me a week, and I'll see what I can dig up. But listen, before we go down this road, I need you to think about something. If this is what you think it is, you should be prepared. Talk to a lawyer. Get a sense of what you're looking at, financially and otherwise. If this ends in divorce..." The thought made my stomach churn, but I knew he was right. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'll do that." Davy stood and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Ben. I promise." I nodded, thanked him, and left his office, the wrapper still burning a hole in my pocket. 2 hours later, I found myself sitting in Butch Reed's office, the man himself leaning back in his chair, his piercing eyes studying me like a hawk sizing up its prey. They didn't call him the best divorce lawyer in town for nothing. The man was a shark, plain and simple. If anyone could give me the hard truth, it was him. After laying out my situation, I waited as Butch flipped through a legal pad, jotting down notes. Finally, he looked up and said, "Ben, if this goes where you think it's going, you're looking at losing half. Assets, savings, the house, everything. California's a community property state. It's a clean 50-50 split, no matter what. 50%. Half of everything I'd worked for, everything Kathy and I had built together." It felt like a punch to the gut, but as much as it stung, I knew one thing for certain. I could lose half my life, my money, my house, but I couldn't stay married to a cheater. Butch seemed to read my thoughts because he leaned forward, his voice lowering. "If you're serious about this, Ben, here's my advice. Keep your head down and act normal. Don't give her any reason to suspect you're onto her. If she smells something's up, she'll lawyer up too, and that'll make things a lot messy, eh?" I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I'll do my best," I said. By the time I left his office, I was mentally drained but determined. I needed to play it cool, no matter how much it tore me up inside. When I got home, Kathy was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled as I walked in, her face the picture of normalcy. It made my chest tighten, but I forced myself to smile back. "I've got a business trip tomorrow," I said casually, leaning against the counter. "I'll be out for the entire week." That night, Kathy slid into bed beside me, her hand brushing against my arm. I could feel her warmth as she moved closer, her intentions clear. "Come on," she murmured softly, her voice carrying that familiar tone. But I couldn't. "I'm tired," I said, my voice low and flat. She paused for a moment, then sighed, rolling over to face the other side of the bed. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts churning. Was I making a mistake? What if the condom wrapper wasn't hers? What if it was Jack's? He'd stayed in our room for a couple of nights before he left for college while his was being painted. Could it have fallen out of his pocket? Or maybe I was just grasping at straws, trying to convince myself that this wasn't what it looked like. But then again, what if it was exactly what I feared? What if Kathy was cheating on me? The questions gnawed at me, tearing holes in my resolve. But in the end, I knew I couldn't back down now. I needed to see this through, no matter where it led. The next morning, I got up early, packed a small bag, and booked a cab. Kathy barely stirred as I grabbed my things and left the house, her soft breathing filling the silence as I closed the door behind me. The drive to the outskirts of town was uneventful, the city slowly giving way to open roads and scattered buildings. The motel was as unremarkable as I'd expected. Cheap, clean enough, and anonymous. Perfect for what I needed. I checked in, dropped my bag on the bed, and sat down, staring at the peeling wallpaper as the hours crawled by. It was almost evening when my phone buzzed. It was Davy. "Ben," he said, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. "Kathy just left the house. She's checked into a motel." My heart skipped a beat. "Which one?" He paused for a moment, then said, "The same motel where you're staying." I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding in my chest as the silence in the room pressed down on me like a weight. The thought of Kathy being here, in this motel, burned in my mind. When Davy called again, his voice was calm but insistent. "She's in the room next to yours, Ben," he said quietly. "Listen to me. Don't confront her. This isn't the time or place. Just leave the room, go somewhere else, cool off. You don't want to make a scene." But I couldn't. "No, Davy," I said, my voice strained. "I need to know. I need to hear it for myself." Davy sighed heavily, his frustration clear. "Fine, but don't do anything stupid. Promise me, Ben." I muttered an agreement and hung up, the phone trembling in my hand. The minutes stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity, until suddenly, I heard voices muffled through the thin walls. At first, I couldn't make out the words, just the sound of Kathy's voice and a man's, a deep, unfamiliar tone. Then, it became clearer. They were having sex. Kathy was very vocal in bed, and then what I heard made my stomach twist. "I don't know why you're still with him," the man said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The guy's old, washed up. He can't satisfy you, can he?" Kathy's voice came next, breathless and filled with something I couldn't recognize anymore. "No, he can't," she said, her words cutting through me like a blade. "You're the best I've had in a while. He's just so old now." The man laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Then why are you still with him?" Her reply came quickly, without hesitation. "I need him to keep the bills running. Now shut up and keep doing what you are good at." I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, every muscle in my body tense, every breath labored. The voices from the next room continued, their laughter like acid eating away at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, fists clenched, ready to tear through the door and end this nightmare. But before I could take a step, the door to my room opened, and Davy walked in, his expression grim. He grabbed my arm firmly, holding me in place. "Don't," he said sharply, his voice low but commanding. "Not like this. Let me go," I hissed, trying to pull free, but Davy's grip tightened. "Listen to me, Ben," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "They've left the window open. I've got my camera rolling. I'm filming everything. You'll have all the evidence you need. If you storm in there now, you're the one who's going to end up in jail, and that'll screw you over in the divorce." I glared at him, my breathing heavy, my vision blurred by rage. "I don't care about the divorce," I growled. "I want to make them pay." Davy stepped closer, his grip unyielding. "And you will," he said firmly, "but not like this. Think, Ben. If you lose it now, you lose everything." For a moment, I struggled against him, the anger boiling inside me, threatening to spill over. But Davy was stronger, and his words were like a cold slap to the face. Slowly, the fight drained out of me, replaced by a wave of overwhelming grief. I slumped back onto the bed, my head in my hands. I felt broken, humiliated, powerless. The woman I had loved and trusted for over 2 decades was in the next room, tearing apart everything we'd built together. After a long silence, I stood up, my jaw set, my fists still trembling. "I'll have my revenge," I said, my voice low and steady, though every word burned like fire. "She might take away my assets, but I'll wreck her, like she wrecked my marriage and my trust." After Davy left, I sat in the dimly lit motel room, my head spinning with everything that had just happened. My body felt heavy, like I was weighed down by 1,000 stones. The plan was simple: stay out for 3 days while Davy kept tabs on Kathy. That was the agreement. But sitting there alone, knowing what was happening, felt like torture. By the time Davy called later that night, I was already pacing the room, my fists clenching and unclenching, replaying her words over and over in my head. His voice on the other end of the line was calm, methodical, as if he were trying to keep me grounded. She and the man left the motel, Davy said. I've got a positive ID on him. His name's Roger Smith. He's her co-worker. I didn't say anything for a moment, my throat dry and tight. Roger Smith. The name meant nothing to me, but the fact that she was with someone from her office cut deeper than I'd expected. All those late nights she claimed were spent working. Davy continued, keeping his tone matter of fact. I'll keep watching. For now, just stay put like we agreed. You don't want to make any moves before we've got everything we need. I barely muttered a response before hanging up. The hours that followed were excruciating, every tick of the clock a reminder of what she was doing and who she was doing it with. The next day, Davy called again. His updates were short, clinical, but each word landed like a punch to the gut. She's been spending time with Roger at his place. It's the same pattern, meeting up after work, staying late. I've got enough footage to make a case. I stayed quiet, gripping the phone tightly.
And
She's been having sex with him every day, Davy said, his voice steady, though I could sense the hesitation in his tone. She's doing it at Roger's home. Before heading back home, I met with Butch and Davy in Butch's office. The atmosphere was heavy, the blinds drawn, and the room filled with the faint scent of leather and coffee. Butch leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, while Davy stood near the window, arms crossed. So, we're sticking to the plan, Butch said, his voice firm and direct. Ben, you go back home, keep it cool, and don't let her suspect a thing. The evidence Davy's gathered is more than enough, but the longer we play this smart, the stronger your case will be. Davy nodded in agreement. You've got to act normal, Ben. No confrontations, no slip-ups. Let her think everything's fine. Meanwhile, I'll keep tracking her movements, just in case she tries to pull anything new. I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach tightening. I understand, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I'll handle it. Butch leaned forward, his expression sharp. Good. Now remember, if you lose your cool, you lose your leverage. Keep that in mind every second you're in that house. With a deep breath, I nodded. We reviewed the details one last time before I left. The weight of what was ahead felt suffocating, but I was resolved to see it through. When I arrived home, Kathy was in the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw me. You're back, she said cheerfully, coming closer as if to hug me. I stepped back, raising a hand. Wait, I said quickly. I think I might have been exposed to COVID-19. Someone at work tested positive, and I'm not feeling great. I don't want to risk getting you sick. Her face shifted to concern. Oh no, are you okay? Do you have symptoms? Just a bit of a sore throat, I lied, keeping my tone calm. But I think it's best if I stay in the guest room for a few days, just to be safe. Kathy nodded, her worries seeming genuine. Of course. Let me know if you need anything, tea, soup, whatever. I'll take care of you. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Thanks. I'll manage. She hesitated for a moment, then asked, Do you think we should cancel the anniversary party? It's only a few weeks away. I shook my head, keeping my expression neutral. No need for that. I'll be fine in a few days. While I'm in isolation, I'll use the time to plan the anniversary celebrations. Her face softened, and she smiled. That's sweet of you. I nodded again, keeping my composure. Inside, I was anything but calm. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence of the guest room. I picked it up, already knowing it was Davy. She left the office during lunch, he said without preamble. She's at Roger's house again. Same routine. My jaw clenched, but I said nothing, letting him continue. I've sent you the videos and pictures, Davy added. You should have everything in your inbox. I stared at the phone for a moment before opening the email. There they were, clear, undeniable proof of her betrayal. Kathy stepping into Roger's house, the two of them tangled together in ways I didn't want to imagine. For a few minutes, I just watched in silence, the bile rising in my throat. My hand tightened around the phone, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Finally, I broke the silence. If I wasn't her husband, I said, my voice cold and detached, I'd probably enjoy these videos. But now, she just makes me sick. There was a pause on Davy's end before he spoke again, his tone measured. I know this isn't easy, Ben, but it's only a matter of time now. 7 days in isolation felt like an eternity, but I knew I had to stick to the plan. Kathy was too oblivious, too wrapped up in her little world to suspect anything. When the time came for me to come out of isolation, I did so with as much composure as I could muster. I forced myself to rejoin her, to act like everything was normal. She was eager, of course, probably hoping things would go back to how they used to be. But when she tried to pull me close, I didn't let her. I'm still feeling weak, I said, my voice steady despite the mess inside me. I don't think I'm up for anything tonight. She frowned, her concern genuine. You've been sick, Ben. You should take it easy. I will, I said, but I'm really not feeling great. The next day, I went to get a full STD check. I needed to know the truth, to make sure I wasn't walking into a disaster. The clinic was quick and efficient, and I tried not to think too hard about what might come back from the results. But I had to know. When I returned home, I started sending out invitations for the anniversary party. Family, friends, everyone I could think of. The party was happening, and I was going to make sure it went off without a hitch. That afternoon, the phone rang. My kids called to confirm they would be there to celebrate. I felt a small flicker of something warm at the sound of their voices, but it didn't last long. Later, Kathy came up to me, looking softer than usual. I love you, Ben, she said, her voice sincere. I'm so happy to have you as my husband. I gave her a small, empty smile, the mask firmly in place. I know you are, honey. A week later, the day finally arrived, the anniversary celebration. It was all set. The house was filled with people, their voices ringing through the rooms, laughter echoing off the walls. Everyone was congratulating me, telling me how lucky I was, how beautiful the years had been. Kathy was radiant, as usual, beaming with that bright, almost innocent smile she always had in front of guests. She had invited people from her office, of course. Roger was there, too, with his wife. I couldn't stop myself from noticing how they exchanged glances, how Kathy was practically glued to my side while he stood nearby, pretending to be engaged in conversation with someone else. I didn't invite anyone from my office. I could have, but I didn't want them there. Not while this charade was playing out. Kathy found it odd that no one from my work was around, but I had a quick answer prepared. They're all tied up in an important meeting, I said, my voice smooth, not giving her a reason to doubt it. It wasn't exactly a lie. It was just a little creative truth. But I didn't need anyone from my office there. Kathy's parents arrived soon after, congratulating us, showering us with kind words. I forced myself to smile and thank them, but inside, I was anything but happy. They didn't know the truth, of course. They didn't know what I knew. Kathy, for her part, held on to me throughout the evening, her arm around mine, her smile never faltering as she greeted everyone with that same practiced enthusiasm. She was so intent on making sure everyone saw how perfect everything was, how perfect we were. But all I could think about was how long I could keep up the act. The evening was in full swing, everyone mingling, laughing, congratulating. It was almost too much, too perfect. And yet, I had to remind myself that this was only the calm before the storm. Then Davy and Butch arrived. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when everything would finally come crashing down. I had spent weeks setting it up, planning every detail. Now, it was time to execute. I asked Kathy to let go of my hand, her touch a constant reminder of everything I had endured. She didn't question me, just smiled and continued to greet our guests, blissfully unaware of what was coming. I walked over to the giant screen we had installed for the occasion, and as I stood in front of it, the lights dimmed. Suddenly, I was visible to everyone. I grabbed the mic, my heart pounding in my chest, but I pushed through it. I'm grateful that everyone is here tonight, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Everyone here matters a lot to me and to Kathy. The crowd murmured, nodding, smiling. I've been married to Kathy for the last 24 years and 6 months, I continued. Kathy tried to sneak in, her voice quiet but urgent. No, it's 25 years. I smiled, a small, knowing smile, and looked at her. I'll explain, honey. Then I turned to Davy, who was holding the large, carefully wrapped portrait-sized gift. Davy, I said, please, present the gift to my wife. Davy walked up to the stage, the gift in his hands. Kathy, still smiling, moved toward him, standing next to her parents. She didn't know yet what was coming. As her father helped her unwrap the gift, I could feel the tension building. Every second felt like an eternity. The shock on Kathy's face as the image appeared was everything I expected, but it didn't make it any easier to watch. It was Kathy on top of Roger having sex with him. She screamed, her voice piercing the tension in the room, and her father's reaction was just as I'd anticipated, angry, furious. Ben, what is the meaning of this? This is a very sick joke, he shouted. the rage in his voice almost drowning out the shock I was feeling. I glanced at my father-in-law, trying to keep my voice calm despite the boiling anger inside me. It's not a joke. That image is just a better screenshot of the video I'm about to play. The image was only the beginning, and I'd prepared for it. Davy moved to the controls, and I could hear the clicks of the buttons before the video filled the giant screen. Kathy on top of Roger, and the words Kathy had spoken in the video echoed through the room, her voice almost unrecognizable. I'm keeping him just to keep the bills rolling. The impact of those words hit like a punch to the gut. But I'd heard it before, so this time it did not hurt at all. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I could feel every eye in the room on me, but I didn't falter. A man in the black suit appeared suddenly, his calmness only adding to the surreal nature of the scene. He moved with purpose, not even glancing at Kathy, whose face was still twisted in shock. He walked up to her, his steps deliberate, and handed her the manila envelope with one simple sentence. "Mrs. Miller, you have been served." Kathy froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the envelope, but she didn't open it. Her eyes darted between the man and me, confusion and anger swirling on her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Without hesitation, the man turned, walking past her to Roger, who was standing rigidly, his own expression a mix of surprise and guilt. The man in the black suit handed him another envelope, his voice steady as he said, "Mr. Smith, you have been served." Roger's eyes widened as he took the envelope, glancing nervously at Kathy, who was still processing everything. But before he could say anything, the man moved on, almost as if he had done this 100 times before. Next, the man walked to the CEO. The room seemed to shrink as the man approached, his footsteps echoing off the walls. He handed the CEO his envelope, the same words slipping from his lips. "Mr. Thompson, you have been served." The CEO, a man I'd respected not long ago, took the envelope with a furrowed brow, his face paling as he processed the situation. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. But the man didn't answer, turning away and exiting the room just as quickly as he had entered. "Mr. Thompson," I began, locking eyes with the CEO, my words slow but deliberate. "That is a lawsuit for not enforcing the company's morality code. Your employees were out on lunch, going home to have some immoral sex." The room was silent, everyone still processing the events unfolding. I could see Thompson's face twist in confusion and anger, but I didn't care. He had played his part in this betrayal too. I turned to Roger, the man who had not only destroyed my trust but shattered my marriage. "Mr. Smith, you've been served for alienation of affection and breaking down my marriage." I could hear the words echo in the room, the sting of them hitting hard. But then my gaze shifted to Kathy. I swallowed hard, but I didn't let myself waver. She was the one who had hurt me the most, the one who had chosen this path and destroyed everything we had built. "And Kathy, you just got served for divorce." Her eyes were wide now, her lips trembling, but I wasn't done. I had to make this clear. I had to make her understand. "I previously said that we've been married for 24 years and 6 months. Yes, it's true. But the truth is, our marriage died the day you went out to screw this guy." The words tasted bitter, but they were the truth, and I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. "And from our investigations, we know it started 6 months ago." I saw the flicker of guilt and anger in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. "I don't care why you did it," I said, my voice hardening, the finality in my words ringing through the room. "I don't need to know. Just get out of my house." And just like that, I felt something inside me click into place. It was over. The days following that moment felt like an endless waiting game, but the chaos hadn't stopped. Kathy's parents were relentless, calling me, coming over, trying to talk me down from what they saw as a rash decision. They begged me, pleaded with me to forgive Kathy, to give her another chance. "Ben, you don't understand. Kathy's going through something," her mother insisted, her eyes full of concern. "You've been together for so long. You can work through this." Her father, usually a man of few words, joined in with a more direct approach. "You can't just throw away 24 years. Think about the family. Think about everything you've built together." But I was resolute. I had made my decision, and nothing was going to change that. The betrayal had cut too deep. There was no coming back from this. I didn't need their pleading or their well-meaning advice. I had given Kathy more than enough chances to be honest with me, and she had chosen to lie, to deceive. It was over. Still, Kathy didn't give up. As if the truth of everything we'd been through wasn't enough, She fought back with a new, strange excuse. At the hearing, her eyes filled with tears, and she looked at me with a pleading expression. Ben, please, she started, her voice cracking. I've been going through a lot. I have a hormone imbalance, and that's why I wanted more sex. You weren't able to provide that for me, and that's why I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, this was her excuse? I looked over at Butch, my lawyer, and saw the skepticism on his face. He was quick to respond. Ms. Miller, you have never informed my client about this hormone imbalance issue. In fact, there are no medical records or doctor's test reports to substantiate your claim. Kathy flinched at Butch's words. Her eyes darted down, clearly caught off guard. The judge, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward, a stern look on his face. Ms. Miller, if there was any such medical issue, why didn't you inform your husband? Why didn't you take the necessary steps to address it with him, especially if it was affecting your marriage so drastically? Kathy remained silent for a moment, and I could see the frustration building in her. The judge didn't give her time to form a response, continuing with an air of finality. If you truly had such an issue, you should have communicated it with your husband. And now, we find no substantial proof. The court finds no grounds for reconciliation. The weight of his words felt heavy, but it was what I had expected. I'd made my case, and I knew there was no turning back now. I was done trying to make sense of her actions. The judge finally concluded, after 7 months of back and forth, that the divorce was granted. The divorce had done its damage, but the fallout didn't stop there. Jack and Emily, my kids, were in the middle of all this chaos. They didn't take sides, but their silence spoke volumes. They were angry at Kathy for what she had done, but they were also angry at me for how I exposed her. I couldn't blame them. I had put everything on display, torn apart the life they knew, and even though it was justified in my eyes, I understood that the way I handled things had hurt them. They stopped communicating with both of us. As much as it pained me, I knew it was their way of dealing with the betrayal. I kept my distance from them, trying to give them space to heal. It wasn't easy. Not knowing where I stood with them left a hole that nothing seemed to fill. But I had made my choices, and now I had to live with the consequences. Financially, things had changed too. My assets had been reduced by half after the divorce settlement, everything I had worked for, divided down the middle. But as hard as it was to watch everything I had accumulated over the years slip away, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Kathy had taken her share, but my dignity, my self-respect, they were still mine. I had kept those intact. Roger wasn't faring any better. He was in his own battle, fighting for a divorce from his wife. I knew she had hired Butch to represent her, and there was no way he was going to come out of that without a major dent. The guy might have played a role in the destruction of my marriage, but his own was falling apart, and it was only a matter of time before the damage hit him too. The CEO, on the other hand, wanted this whole mess to go away. He had his own interests to protect, and the public scandal was bad for business. It wasn't long before I got a call from him, arranging a backdoor meeting. The offer was simple, $1 million for me to withdraw the case. They wanted silence, closure, and I was the key to that. I had already divorced Kathy, and I wasn't looking for more revenge. I had made my peace with the decision, and if this money would end the chaos and give me some financial cushion as I started this next chapter, then I'd take it. So, I withdrew the case. I still keep the $1 million with me, a symbol of the deal I made to end it all. 3 years later, I'm sitting on the porch of my little farmhouse, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the colors bleeding across the sky in a way that only the countryside can offer. The air is crisp, the world feels quieter here, and it's the peace I've been craving for years. I'm surrounded by my animals, 2 German shepherds, Max and Duke, both loyal and protective, their eyes always watching, as if they're making sure no one or nothing can hurt me anymore. They're more than pets. They're my companions, my constant reminder that I'm not alone out here. The farm itself is small, nothing extravagant, but it's mine. I've spent the past year learning the ropes, feeding the chickens, working the land, fixing fences, and finding satisfaction in the simple, repetitive tasks that make up a day. It's a different kind of life than the one I left behind, but it's the life I needed. I found a sense of purpose here that was missing for too long, something grounding. There's a rhythm to it, the animals, the land, the seasons. I've stopped rushing. It's like time here moves slower, and I've learned to appreciate every moment of it. What's even more surprising is that my kids have started visiting again. Jack and Emily, the 2 people I thought I had lost forever, have come around. It hasn't been easy, and it's still awkward sometimes, but I can see the walls coming down between us. They're older now, with their own lives and their own battles, but every visit feels like progress. We talk about the farm, about life, about things that don't feel as heavy as they once did. I'm not trying to fix anything anymore. I'm just here for them when they need me. As for Kathy, well, I've heard through the grapevine that she's living with her parents now. From what I gather, she's under therapy, trying to work through everything that happened. I didn't expect things to be easy for her. She's facing her own demons, and I can't help but feel a small sense of empathy for her, even after everything. It's not my problem anymore, but it's hard to completely shut off the person I once cared about. I'm not bitter about it, though. I'm not angry. I've let all of that go. In this quiet place, I've learned that holding onto rage only keeps you chained to the past. And I'm not living in the past anymore. I've moved on, and for the first time in years, I'm actually happy. I wake up to the sound of the birds, the wind in the trees, and the occasional bark of my dogs chasing after something. I have everything I need right here. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.